Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Roger Durling. I'm the executive director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and I'm so excited about tonight because we actually have the cast and director, writer, and producers of the film Working Men, which had the world premiere at the last Santa Barbara International Film Festival. The Hollywood Reporter reviewed it. Right after the film festival, and it mentioned that this movie is a potent tribute to out of work Americas, and that this timely drama about factory closures in the Rust Belt features a strong cast of veteran actors, including Peter Gerety, Billy Brown, and Talia Shire. Among them is also Lovell Holder, who's producer, welcome Lovell, and Clark Peterson, producers of the film, and writer director Robert Jury. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. And right before we came on live, I was talking about the fact that I saw this movie a year ago, and I have seen it a few times over the year. And last night, Robert, I saw it again one more time, and I was struck with how immediate, how urgent this film has become throughout the year. And did you ever envision the journey that you guys have been in with this film?
In a word, no. Like a lot of filmmakers right now in this present state and year that we're in, I don't know that we could have ever conceived a situation like we're in, and then how the movie is suddenly, struck maybe an even bigger chord with audiences based on joblessness around the country and around the world since the onset of the virus and so forth. So um, no, it's just kind of remarkable, even since we premiered in Santa Barbara, just how much more the story seems to be,
And
as I've
Rob
said before, meeting the moment.
and Robert, you started working on this a decade ago, right?
I did. It was a script that I started writing, I think, in 2009, 2010, and it went through the Film Independent Talent Labs, where then I was fortunate enough to meet through a contact there, Clark Peterson, who's here and with us, and has kind of rode the wave for the past decade with this project and with me, and introduced me to Lovell, and then we snowballed into the casting process, and these three people came on board: Billy, Talia, and Peter. So it's been kind of a miracle run of 10 years.
Um, I want to bring the actors in, and last night I was struck with the fact that I actually clocked it. It's until for the first 40 minutes of this film, there's not a lot of dialogue. Um, a lot of what Talia, Billy, and Peter, what you guys are doing is communicating through a lot of physical um, uh, movement and you know maybe start with Talia. What was it like that for you to work on a film that for a big chunk of time there is you it's dependent on transitions on physicality.
And on rhythm, I want to say that Clark, who's my friend for many years and a man of great taste, sent me the script. And on the page, and I clocked it too. It was, I thought, oh my God, this character just doesn't say anything. And remember when he stuck the little flash bulbs in his eyeglasses, that moment, I screamed. It was like an extraordinary moment. But I thought that reading it and seeing it, this was like a fascinating piece. It was a purgatory. It was a purgatorial piece of great beauty. If purgatory, well, a Catholic, I'm always going to be stuck there. Anyway, I thought this is remarkable that you could hold the piece together, right? And it took on, and when I saw it, it looked beautiful, beautifully executed. And then there was Peter, your face, your angelic face, your body language, that great walk through Chicago. It was quite stunning. was stunning on the page and more stunning to see it.
Mhm. Peter,
Peter, you're laughing. Oh.
I'm laughing at the walk because the walk reminds me of, I had a conversation with Bobby Gerety after the fact, and I said, look, I watched and everything, and I was so upset by the fact that my lower lip kept quivering. And I found out that it was because I had a potassium deficiency. And so I started eating a banana every morning, and I started falling in love with things that had avocados in them. And the lower lip stopped quivering. But I said to Bobby, I said, geez, I mean, my lower lip is quivering and everything. He said, I thought that was a really brilliant acting choice that you made.
No, you look like Rosano Brazzi, who had this great.
We thought that was an incredible facial control, Peter.
It's
Right.
amazing control over the lower lip. And it was sort of the same situation with the walk. Because, frankly, I don't walk very well. So it was the acting, there wasn't a hell of a lot of acting going on there at all. It was just lip and walk, lip and walk, lip and walk.
Clark, what was it about the script that attracted you to it?
Well, I have to say, in a very rare instance, even before I read the script, the person that introduced me and Bob said, hey, I read this script and it's about, a guy, he's a worker and the factory closes and he decides he's going to keep going to the factory and doing his job. And that one sentence just struck me. And I said, I have to read this script. Because somehow that was just such a moving concept to me. And when I read the script, it really delivered on that, premise. And I just thought like, wow, this is something, it's about the importance of work in our lives. And I just think this is such an important thing that is universal. And even though we don't all work in factories, we all can relate to the importance of what we do. And, I fell in love with it the first time I read it. And I get sent a lot of scripts. And this was just the one that I said, you know what, I got to help make this movie. And that was when Bob and I met. And just to follow up on what Talia said, it's true. I remember the very conversation when we sent it to her and she called me back and she said, it's the rhythm. It's the rhythm. It has such an interesting rhythm. And, Talia is such an outside the box thinker. I never expect to get a standard answer from her on anything. But again, it was like, wow, she's right. It has a rhythm to it. And then, and Peter was able to deliver with that walk on that rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
That rhythm that we're talking about was captured so well by our editors and the gentleman who scored the movie.
Mm-hmm.
When you read it, I never would have imagined that was the current of note that was going to be played, and how the movement of Bob's writing was going to be then even brought more to life in editing. So between the editing and the music, Bob's words really leapt off the page along with our performances. So kudos to those departments.
That was a father and daughter duo, wasn't it? The editors.
Yes,
It was.
Morgan Halsey and Richard Halsey.
Right.
Richard Halsey, who won the Oscar for editing Rocky.
Rocky.
Talia
Right.
was, of course, in.
Terrific.
And I was also going to say David Gonzalez, who composed the score, actually composed the entire score over the course of about 2.5 weeks. He really put pedal to the metal. And when you think back to it, like, because so much of the first act is non-speaking, the movie does sort of live and die but by the musical life. And
Right.
so Billy is very astute in pointing out that David deserves a lot of credit for really setting the tone for the film.
100%.
Billy, as I mentioned earlier, the current events, everything that has transpired in the past year it's reflected in the film. The issue of race is never brought up in the forefront, but it is there because, your character's an outlier. You're the only African American. I mean, one of the main characters is African American. Can you tell us about the role and your experience with it?
You know, it was one of the reasons it was so appealing, because Walt Brewer is such an outlier, not behaviorally or his strained relationship from his former wife, family, almost being a loner in this town, but also being the only Black man of prominence within our story. And you could extrapolate when the walls sort of come crumbling down around Walt Brewer at that penultimate moment, and Allery comes to help out his newfound friend. What direction are things going to go? You know, based on socially where we are now, any audience watching for the first time might perceive this is going to go the way I've experienced it, or the way my neighbors have, or what I've seen on any late night or early news report. Black men in warehouse trespassing, breaking all sorts of codes and violations, and white police authorities show up. But Bob's choices in writing went in an original direction, and we kept true to the story and the arc of Brewer and Parks. And going against type was so appealing to me as who I am personally, and then what we're able to bring to life in the page from Bob's words. So I appreciated all of that.
Mm-hmm. Talia, last night, you know, I mentioned that I was watching it again last night. You know, the moments where you go in his house and go over the
Snoop
pill.
around. Yes. Right. Oh, first of all, I mean, the set wasn't that set wonderful?
Tremendous.
I mean,
tremendous.
The details there on that set were stunning. Yes, I start to snoop around there but you know, I always, for me, Walter is angelic. He's an angelic force. He sets up a dance with Allery, but he doesn't cut into the dance. He's an extraordinary character. But I have to tell you, that scene in Walter and the meal he served wasn't that a great meal, Peter? And then I also snooped around his medicine chest. But that was a wonderful scene. I
Yeah.
loved shooting that.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah, Robert, I'm curious again about the 45 minutes. I mean, the 40 minutes, was all of that scripted? Was there, you know, collaboration with the actors in developing that first half of the film?
Oh, you're talking about the
walk?
primarily silent movie at the very
Correct.
beginning? Yeah. Well, to piggyback on what Peter had said, you know, when we had our first conversation over the phone, I remember Peter said, well, and I mentioned to him, you know, there's going to be a lot of walking in this script, Peter, as you well know. So yeah, I mean, that was in there as scripted. It's a bit of a slow burn to enter into the film. And Peter had told me, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I come with a limp. And I said, I think that's great. I mean, that's who you are, and that's who this character is going to be. But yeah, for the extent of that first 30, 40 minutes, that's pretty much what's on the page. We shot what was on the page, but of course, these actors that we have with us tonight came to me with numerous ideas and ideas at important junctures, I think, that changed what was on the page and changed the film all for the better.
And I got to say that Bob really had a vision about, you know, that sort of silent character and silent chunk of the movie. I remember a couple times while we were developing the script, I would say, you know, don't you think Allery would say something right here? And Bob would always say, no, that's not who he is. But it also, because of that factor in the script, we knew we had to find an actor who is able to carry, you know, such a long, you know, silent period and could act with his expressions and his body and everything else, because it was not a dialogue-driven script, and which was why, you know, we went after Peter, and we're so blessed to have, you know, collaborated with him, because I don't think there are many actors who could have pulled that off.
Yeah,
Well,
and
it already reminds me of when I read it, it's even a story, but to think back to 2007, Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood, with Daniel Day-Lewis, going through the mining and the digging and the unearthing, but just the musical note of that droning sound, but no dialogue. And I read Bob's words and I said, this reminds me of something I've seen that I fell in love with cinematically. And when all the pieces come together, as I'm sure they will, it's going to be beautiful. And I was proven right.
Yeah, I love it because, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, what I loved was absolutely the music. It wasn't synthesized. It was real. It was the melody of really what we're not speaking about just yet, which is the child, but also what Clark said, an actor that can carry that silence. Peter, you have to have a presence, a certain kind of positive presence that can wear that kind of silence, you know, that you're not turned off by it, that there's an intimacy that an actor like Peter can take you just in that walk. So,
Right.
You know, I was thinking today that actors always do this. Actors approach it this way, I think, anyway, is that anytime you have a scene, whether it's on stage or in an audition or in a film or anything, you're never at the beginning of anything. You're always in the middle of something. Something has happened, and then you're caught up in the middle of something, and you have to figure out what the time before is. What's the moment before? What's the moment before in your life? And I was lying in bed half asleep this morning. I was thinking, what was it like for Talia and I? What was it like for Iola and I prior to Gabe taking his life?
Yeah.
You know, prior to the factory closing down, but prior to even just being in the factory, and you know, what was our life like? And there are these tiny little hints where for one moment she's talking to a friend of hers and she says, you know, that Allery used to be light on his feet and he could dance or something like that. And you think, holy mackerel, that's not the guy I'm watching. No, that's not the guy I'm seeing here. And I don't know, it's just what happened. What happened after? What was it like after Gabe committed suicide?
Mm-hmm.
But in the years, in the succeeding years before the factory shut down, you know, what is the life like? Is it because Talia has often said that she has a moment of Iola has a moment of kind of a breakthrough moment for her where she says, I'm not going to put up with being dead anymore. I'm not going to have this anymore.
I cannot be dead anymore. Yeah.
I cannot be dead anymore. I need to live, you know, and so anyway, it has to do with I'm getting back to the walking.
No, that was my challenge to you. That
exactly. Exactly.
But we couldn't go back.
And even in the walking, what we're watching in the walking is not just me walking to work. It's me walking to work after the factory is closed down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
amazing.
What is my expectation? I don't think Allery is expecting, okay, it's all over. I mean, if it's all over, what the hell is he going to the factory for?
Yeah, I mean, you in that walk, you see your inner turmoil and what you're struggling inside, which is the beauty of watching you. I was going to say earlier, I love that it's 40 minutes of almost silence, because you get the sense that the characters are trapped in time, that they're like frozen. They've been paralyzed, and it's until Billy comes around and that something happened, you know, they're snapped out of it.
But Roger, it's also not just empty space. I mean, other than myself, in the period of time that we're walking, we're able to see the milieu that we're walking in. We're able to see the town. We're able to see the other people on porches. We're able to see they're getting their goods ready to sell at a yard sale because they need the money. We're getting to see what the life of this town is in its agony of dying or whatever it is, you know. So there's a lot of, I just think that there's a lot of information that we get in that, even in that 40-minute period of time, other than just Allery. We're getting a whole milieu.
As Talia said the other day, you know, it's like all those intricately woven individual threads coming together. I mean, it's not cliche, but it's real, because we have a living tapestry that is coming to life with every step that Parks takes. And in every look at every sliver and section of the life within Orridge. The life that we are holding on to, the life that we want to move away from or recapture or move towards.
Lovell,
well said. Right.
Lovell, would you, you know, tell the audience about how you came about choosing the factory, the space, and what has happened to the factory since?
Of course. No, the factory, we kind of realized very early on, I mean, upon reading Bob's script, it's very clear that in many ways the movie lives and dies by the authenticity of the factory. And I know there were some early conversations, someone advised potentially like, rent a warehouse and like bring in some machines, you'll have total control. And cooler heads very quickly were like, no, that would be death for this film. And so once we were in Chicago, and Bob, to his credit, had spent truly years touring the greater Midwest looking for the right factory that would fit the needs of the film, which is an operational plastics factory. And then kind of miraculously in Chicago, we came upon McRae Manufacturing, which up until recently is right out by O'Hare, in this little subdivision of Chicago called Norridge, Illinois. And the factory had been operational, making plastic injectable molding, which is kind of, and Billy's a genius with what the manufacturing industry is doing and what the numbers and statistics are. Like Billy especially has more than done his homework in this regard. But there are so many factories where you see these things coming off the assembly line, you have no clue what they are, but it's the reflectors for bikes, it's the cup holder that goes in your car, it's, you know, the casing on the inside of like a pencil pouch or something like that. And all these things have to be made. And that's what happens in these factories. And what's also kind of fascinating about them, and Bob was very, very diligent about this in the casting, is that the workforce in these factories is one of the most diverse in America. You have a very equal division between men and women, very, very ethnically diverse. And I think it's something that I know for me personally, I did not know that the workforces in so many of these factories in the Midwest were that kind of giant pool of demographics. And that was very much reflected in McRae, the factory where we were shooting. And Brian Miller, who was the manager, could not have been kinder and more supportive to us as we were there working. And in kind of as you alluded to, Roger, in a sad case of life imitating art, about a year after we wrapped the film, the factory itself did close. And it's a credit to Brian, the manager, that all the workers there have since, he has managed to help them all find new employment since. But the factory is indeed closed and is scheduled for demolition at the end of this month. So parts of it are I assume already gone, and if not, they will be gone shortly after Thanksgiving. But Bob has had a chance to tour the empty factory since we wrapped, and I know he has some. I mean, you can speak to this, Bob. It was a very kind of sobering experience to be in this place that had so much life, and like these cats that they kept there at the factory that just like were kind of the factory cats that sort of just like roamed through the venue. And it was a place that was very much filled with life. And then seeing the footage that Bob shot of it now empty. I mean, I was only there for the better part of 2 to 3 weeks, and I was kind of emotionally gutted when I watched that footage back.
Well, question for you. When you had your blue collar tour, were the factory employees invited to the screening that you had on the side of the building wall?
The screening, what Billy's referring to, Roger, is we had taken Working Man on the Road this past summer for a drive-in tour around the Rust Belt, drive-in
Great
theaters
idea.
across
Oh,
the
wow.
Rust Belt. It was a incredible experience because there were a lot of little factory towns and small cities that are very much like Working Man's imaginary town, right? Fictional city. And the last stop of our drive-in tour, we decided it was appropriate to stop at McRae Manufacturing, that factory. They mentioned, Lovell mentioned Brian Miller, the manager there was nice enough to take me through one last tour of the factory, which had been completely gutted. All of the machines that you see in the movie, all of them have been auctioned off. It was gone. Really hollow and sad place. And all the workers were gone except for Brian and 3 or 4 others. So it was really just a handful of us who watched that last bit of our drive-in tour. We projected the movie on the outside of the factory. And it was really just kind of a moving experience for all of us that were there that night after sort of this whirlwind trip of the Rust Belt to end up right where we had started there at that factory, which we now know, as Lovell stated, is slated for demolition. So I don't know, it's you alluded to it earlier. There's just no accounting for some of this stuff, you know, the timing, why we are when we are, and why this story is happening when it's happening. But I'm just grateful that we got to tell it, and really grateful that these actors and my partners, Lovell and Clark, were a part of this with me.
Mm-hmm. All 3 characters go through a transformation, and it's very subtle watching all 3 of you be transformed throughout the movie. Is that something that was calibrated in the script? You know, like, for example, Talia, jumps to mind when Ellery tells you, you know, it's something I need to do. I love the fact that you grab a glass of water and you react to it physically with simply drinking a glass of water. Were those transitions and the transformation that you go through, the 3 of you, is something, again, calibrated?
Well, I mean, this is a quote from somebody, but all actors look for transformation. So we like to start it off at one place and take it to the next place. And that's why you do need, as Billy said, all these characters coming together in this extraordinary dance. And, you know, and truly each character impacts on the other one. You know, Billy at one moment in time in the dance that we have, he's my son, you know, at one moment. He's the son that Allery must embrace. And that's what was so interesting to me about the piece. But yes, and there is, and it lands happily, almost on its feet, right, Peter? When we were dancing at the very end, we were almost on our feet, but not quite. But
we were
yeah.
almost off our feet.
Want to see the capacity for something that these people with their closed hearts, all 3, now with open hearts, no matter how vulnerable Walter might be, that they're all gonna be all right. They're all gonna dance. And yes, and it is hard because the factory. That's what's amazing, Robert, what you did, because the factory is sort of dying through this piece, right? While we come alive. But our hope is, and my hope is, that we're going to have big transformations even in this one area with work and workers through education as we go into the next age, where America is once again being extremely productive. I mean, I went off there, but yes, transformation.
Yeah, I mean, you allude to something that I love about the film, is that it still gives you a sense of hope despite the disaster and the turmoil that is happening, there is a sense that we could make something out of this wreckage.
By the way, that is what I believe, that this is that moment in time when through education, as we embrace with all of our pain, which is what the movie does, it has grief, but we can go forward and have a transformation.
Sure, sure. I mean, look at all of the stuff that's happening. Every theater in America is coming up with very creative and optimistic ways of dealing with this pandemic. And you see it on not just on Zoom, but virtual theater and all kinds of things that are happening now. I mean, I'm doing a dozen of them, but I know other people are doing 10 dozen of them, you know, and just wonderful stuff. Wonderful. I saw a piece by Bill Irwin the other day. He's America's premier clown and a brilliant actor, doing some Beckett and everything on, and it's just amazing. But what strikes me is that as we come out of this, and we will come out of this, this stuff isn't going to get sloughed off. It's going to be a lesson learned for how to go, for ways to push us into the future. Can you imagine the kind of technological advances or changes that are happening because of the situation we're in right now? And young artists, youngsters who are today at home. My grandson is a teacher, and his wife is a teacher. They taught in Morocco for years and years, and then now they're home. And she worked for this museum that is an interactive science museum. You couldn't ask for two better people to be homeschooling their 5 and 2-year-old, right? But can you imagine where the 5 and 2 and 6 and 7-year-olds of today are going to be like when they're adult artists, and the kind of tools they're going to have in their tool bag and in their backpack because of what we're going through now? I feel incredibly optimistic about it. I won't be around to see it, but I'll be around to see the beginning of it, you know? And it's like in Bob's movie, there's a scene in the beginning, and then there's another scene that's alluded to a little later on where Allery goes into his now dead son's bedroom, which it seems relatively untouched. And there's a clarinet over here, and there's a guitar over here, and there's a mandolin over here, and there's a camera here. Obviously, this house gave birth to, and she and I gave, birth to and reared a child who is terrifically creative. So that existed in this house. Mm-hmm. So that when Iola says, I can't stand being dead anymore, well, we weren't always dead. There was a creative life force in this house.
Robert, I do want to ask you about the design. I noticed that blues, the first half of the film, there's a lot of recessive colors being used, and it's there's actually one moment when the generator kicks in that we start noticing finally warm colors being used in the cinematography. Can you talk about that arc?
Sure. No, perceptive. It was important, I think, to sort of establish this world in blues and grays, and even down to the uniforms, right, that we see these workers change into, and that Allery wears every day. Our great director of cinematography, Piero Basso, and I had a lot of conversations about how this film should look and feel, and I think one of the real strengths of Piero's work, he's an Italian-born New Yorker now, but he still goes back to Italy quite a bit to shoot films, and they work like we worked on Working Man, which was very quickly, and he's not a DP that's very fussy with lighting. He likes reality, he likes authenticity, and when I saw his reel, even before we had had our first conversation, I just knew that he would be the type of person that would understand how to make this world look authentic, right? And we shot in Chicago in April, which in a lot of places, April is springtime, right? Not Chicago, Illinois, not a large part of the Midwest, and not in the April when we shot. It was
No, Mark.
it was
Snowy.
it was incredibly cold. The coldest April since the 1800s. So we got all of that gray, dead feeling that we wanted and more.
We did.
Yeah, but it's that palette, you know, of course, expands as things start to improve and we start to see more color and warmth injected. And again, just great credit to our costumers and in particular Piero Basso, who has just did, I think, a magical job behind the camera.
It's
Yeah.
funny, Bob. It makes me think of, because as we were alluding to in the final scene with the big dance with Peter and Talia, Piero was so specific that he wanted it to be the most colorful scene in the whole film, that there had been this rebirth. And I remember we walked into the Mexican restaurant where we were filming, Las Palmas, and it was all fluorescent overhead lighting. And Piero kind of walked in just like he'd just watched a shooting happen in front of him. And he turns to the production designer, Sarah Sharp, and he goes, "This is not where you come for your magnificent reconciliation dinner. Come for your pre-divorce lunch."
Yes.
And he turns to Sarah and he goes, "Sarah, are you going to give me my glory?" And she's like, "I will see to that." And sure enough, she finds all these things and helps him
A lot of
coordinate all
neon
these
lights.
camps to come in and just really like made it not a place where you would come for your pre-divorce lunch.
And Robert, it was mentioned earlier about Richard and Morgan Halsey, and you know, Richard won the Oscar for Best Editing for Rocky, which Talia was nominated for Best Actress. You know, can you tell us about choosing, because the film feels like it could be a film that was done in the 70s, and the pace. You know, can you tell us about working with those editors?
I take that as a great compliment too to the film. If you could confuse this for a film from the 70s, I'm a huge fan of that era. But Lovell was kind enough to introduce me and everyone else to the Halseys. And it's funny that you mentioned earlier that 40-page opening and that gap, because at one point when Richard and I were, their editing suite is in their home in Los Angeles. And Richard said to me, you know, the first 40 minutes, Talia, of Rocky, when we showed them the first cut of that film, the studio was furious because they were saying, nothing's happening. This is a boxing movie. What's going on? He's just walking around. They're just talking. He says, yes, we're revealing who these characters are. We're peeling back the layers. He says, this is kind of what's happening here, Bob. He says, this feels like a movie that I would have worked on in the 70s. And I told Richard that, boy, if we're anywhere close to that, we've got to feel good about the work we're doing. So, and Morgan, his daughter, who was really doing the heavy lifting at the keys and editing and working daily with us through this, was just just really a phenomenal team. And it's, I think, just did a brilliant job piecing the film together.
Yeah, I was aware of the editing because it is at that 40-minute point that Talia has her friend over for tea, and they're having a conversation, and there's parallel editing with the scene of at the coffee break in the warehouse, and there's a beautiful rhythmic back and forth between the two scenes and the dialogue in the editing.
Yeah, that was discovered in the editing room. I hadn't written it very well, to be honest, in the script, and I didn't know this wasn't really cutting together the way that I'd hoped it would in my head. And what are we going to do here? And then it seemed to just fall into place. And that's something that Richard would do, is sort of this old sage. He would wander in at particular times when I think he could maybe sense, he would walk in from the other room and he could sense maybe when I was struggling with the story, and he'd just kind of look at things and play that back, play that back. Let's see that again. Cut right there. I'd stake my Oscar on it. He'd say things like that. And when somebody says something like that, you should probably listen, right? So, yeah, it was.
That's great.
Yeah.
It was a great working relationship, to be sure.
And Clark, what is it that you would like people to get out of seeing the film now?
Well, again, we've sort of talked about how relevant it is, and you know, it's a movie that shows us how important work is to all of us. And I think, you know, we maybe have never realized that as much as we have this year, when suddenly, you know, people either lost their jobs, or even if you're still working, you're not going into your place of work and you're not with your colleagues. And so I think we've all sort of learned that in our own lives, and it's resonated, you know, from the film perhaps. So look, I think that's, you know, the big thing that we can all take away perhaps. But one other thing I just wanted to mention is, you know, we talked about sort of being blessed to be in this place outside of Chicago where we had this incredible setting and you know, the weather that helped us. But the other thing I wanted to mention is the supporting cast that we had in Chicago, because, you know, other than our 3 stars, nobody else, you know, we didn't bring anybody else in. We couldn't afford to. And what we realized is we really didn't need to, because we were really blessed with this like cornucopia of incredible actors that are based in Chicago. And, you know, maybe even our cast can speak to that, because they were playing opposite the local actors.
Yeah, I had great moments with Sal, who plays Benny, my neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And story-wise, there was an immediate hook between Brewer and Benny, specifically stepping onto the porch. I believe it might have been after the dinner.
Yeah, yeah.
And Brewer's having his smoke. He likes his smokes. American flag draped in the background. And Benny moves into really, you know, the spine, you know, the blood in the veins of what it means to work, to a man, to a woman, to a family, and what himself, his wife, our neighbors in the greater Orange area have lost and continue to lose. The physicality of the work itself, the intangibles that each and every one of us can't speak to in one moment to the next, but we rely on.
Mm-hmm.
Every night we go to sleep, and every moment we wake up. It's the things we can't articulate that work provides. And
Yeah.
Benny laid it out, and that really helped Walt Brewer set his sights even more towards that tip of the spear.
Yeah.
What it would be.
Lovely actor, wasn't he, Walter?
Yeah.
His wife was about getting ready to have a baby. I mean, there
Yeah,
were a lot of
yeah.
little side stories, right? You know,
Yeah.
he was waiting to have a child. I
Well,
mean,
and they were all
wonderful
also
actor.
too such they were all such working actors in Chicago, because I think because of just the remarkable theater scene there, like literally half the cast were in plays simultaneously with shooting the movie. I mean, we got
I
to
saw a
see,
couple, right? I think.
yeah, we got to go see Barbara Robertson, who played Talia's friend. We saw her in a production of Mary
what a
Stuart.
wonderful actress. Oh,
Yeah.
I loved working with her. Yes.
Oh yeah. I mean, and just they were all such consummate pros, because I remember Patrice McLean, who plays Cecilia, Walter's wife, her audition, she came into the room, and like on the casting sheet, it said she was coming into audition for Cecilia, and we were looking at her headshot, and we were like, whoa, yeah, she's totally the right look, everything. And she walks in and she starts doing this, and she's like, okay, how much do you want for the grapefruit? And she was reading the scene for the checkout clerk at the grocery store. And we were like, whoa, that was great. We would really love to see you read this part instead. And so they hand her the audition side for Cecilia, which was that whole 7-minute scene with all those monologues, everything. And she was like, whoa. And we're like, yeah, just take your time. And she comes back in 20 minutes, fully memorized after 20 minutes, that 7-minute scene, and basically gave the exact same performance that you see in the final version of the film. And Bob like turned to us and he was like, well, she's cast. And I mean, it's just a testament to Chicago. All the actors and the crew there are truly such top tier professionals.
Just terrific. They work in Steppenwolf. They work in the Goodman Theater. They work in the Biograph. They work in the there's 5 or 6 theaters there that they shift around between, and they're just dynamite. They work all the time, so of course they're good. They're really good.
Yeah. Well, I want to allude to what Clark was talking about, and one of the lines that really hit me, especially after the 9 months of what we've been going through, is I think it's Peter's character that says that we need jobs to survive, but we need work to feel worth it, to feel worthy, and that line just floored me.
I think it was that Benny who said that?
I think it's
was.
Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think it's me, Roger. I think it's
Peter, you do
Peter
have a
doesn't.
moment.
Peter doesn't have any lines. I don't think.
He just walks.
Because Peter has a moment when he's being interviewed by the reporter, where the reporter's like, "Don't you want to give a statement? Don't you want to give a statement?" And Peter just kind of turns quite effortlessly and so matter of factly and just says, "I just want to do my job."
That's right.
And I think, and it was so funny. I remember Clark on set, because Clark had to duck back to LA near the end of shooting. He was just like, "Whatever we do, make sure we get a close-up on that line. Make sure we need that line in a close-up for the trailer. We might need it. Just make sure we get that line."
Wow.
He's kind of said it all. I mean, that's kind of what the movie's about. He just wants to do his job, you know.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. And, I'm so proud of everything that you guys did for the film, but also the journey that you've been in the past year. It's really wonderful.
And
Thank
the
you.
journey that it took to get to your film festival, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
World premiere in Santa Barbara. We can't forget that. Thank you,
Can't
Roger,
forget
and,
that.
and everybody in
Thank
you.
Santa
Thank you,
Barbara for
Roger.
the
Thank
hospitality.
you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank
Santa
you.
Barbara.
But I would like to know, what is the artwork in back of Talia? Because every time I see Talia, she's got a whole different. What is that, Talia?
These are the Muka prints of the seasons.
Yeah.
The 4 seasons, but I might get rid of one of the seasons. I don't know.
I'll take it if you don't want it. I will take it if you don't want it.
Yeah. Well,
Every-
good night, everybody.
Thank you,
so
Roger.
much.
Thank
Thank you so much, Roger.
Okay.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank
See you guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.